Hi, I'm Dolly Vasta for This Week in East Brunswick, and I'd like to know, how does your garden grow with silver bells and cockle shells and one little lousy petunia? Well, we're going to dismiss the lousy petunia today because we're going to teach you just how to grow the best garden ever. And with me as my co-host is Mike Ratowski from Ferris Farms. Mike, when we start our garden now, we need soil, of course, but there are all different soils and all different ways of going. And I know that you like organic, and a lot of your people ask about organic soil when they come in. Is it better? Is it not?
Okay, well, that's true. It's organic gardening is becoming bigger, and a lot more people are asking questions about it. There's a lot of misconceptions about organic gardening, especially when it does come to the all different types of fertilizers. Plants need fertilizer. A lot of people, especially novices, come in and they buy plants and we tell them how to plant them, but they really don't realize that plants do need nutrition and they need food, just like we need food. The people that are really into it really kind of know everything about it, but just the everyday gardeners and some of the novices really don't realize what a lot of this stuff is all about. Basically, fertilizer, when you're buying fertilizer, there's always three numbers on the bag. This one says 5, 10, 5 on it, and that's a percentage of what nutrients are in the bag. The three main nutrients that plants need are nitrogen, and on this bag, this is 5% nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. They need them all. They need nitrogen the most. And this is a percentage by weight of what's actually in the bag. And in the past, my grandparents, my dad, this was like the standard fertilizer for gardening, 5, 10, 5. All the old timers come in, give me a bag of 5, 10, 5. Well, there's a lot of other types of fertilizers, and 5, 10, 5 was what we considered a chemical fertilizer. It was kind of mass-produced for farmers, mostly actually for farmers when they first came up with it years ago. And it is a chemical fertilizer, and some people get a little antsy about whether they're using chemicals in their gardens or not. I mean, I do like organic stuff. There's pros and cons to both, using chemicals, fertilizers, and organic fertilizers. Basically, though, whether you use organics or chemical fertilizers, they all get broken down into the elements that plants are eventually gonna need, no matter what you're using. So we do carry both lines, and both kinds are important. But specifically, today we're going to talk about all the different types of organic fertilizers there are and what the advantages are. Organic fertilizer, to most people, means that it comes from natural sources. It comes from like cows. As an example, most people know cow manure. They know poultry manure, things like that. It actually comes from an animal. But we use the term organic to let us know how slow release of a fertilizer is. In other words, the chemical fertilizers, when you put them down, are very fast release. They become available almost immediately to the plant, which is good. But sometimes if you use them a little too heavily, you can burn. Exactly, you can burn the roots up. One of the big advantages of using organic fertilizers, since they're natural and they have to be broken down by organisms in the soil so that that plants can use them, they're very, very slow release. They feed very slowly and very evenly, which for the most part is very, very good. But let's say when you're first planting something, sometimes you may want to use a chemical one just to get them started. Boost. Yeah, exactly. You got to be careful when you're using organic fertilizers, because some organic fertilizers don't have all of the three essential components that are really needed. As an example, we have something called bone meal. Bone meal is, I guess, from the cattle industry. It is crushed up bones, and but it is safe to use. They pasteurize it, they steam it so that there's no anything that can hurt anybody. But there's a lot of phosphorus in that. But if you just use that as a complete fertilizer, your plants actually could suffer a little bit because it's mostly phosphorus and it really doesn't have any nitrogen, which the plants really need a lot of. Different types of organic fertilizers. Let's say if you just want to add nitrogen to your soil. This is something called dried blood. Okay, now dried blood sounds kind of icky to most people. They go, oh, I don't want to use blood on my plants. But again, it's a byproduct of the probably the cattle industry or whatever.
Depends on whether you're a vampire.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if a little vampire snap.
It's all right, go on.
But it's loaded with nitrogen, very slow release nitrogen, and It's very good for most plants, especially most plants do need nitrogen, especially during the growing season. The other advantage of dried blood is it tends to act as an animal repellent. I mean, if you have maybe rabbits or groundhogs or something nibbling on your lettuce or your broccoli, a lot of people will dust their plants with this, and it tends to keep the animals away. Of course, until it rains, you have to reapply it, but it also fertilizes them at the same time. But this is just pure nitrogen. There's really, if you look at the label on this, it's 1200. That's 12% nitrogen. And if you just use this solely by itself, initially the plant would grow like crazy, but it's really lacking the other nutrients that plants do need. So this is one form. There are some things that if you just want to do them all at once, they're actually mixtures of everything together, and that's what this stuff here. And then again, there's a lot of different manufacturers of organic fertilizers, but this one here we sell a lot of. It's called Plantone, and if you read the ingredients, it's a mixture of all kinds of good stuff. It's got bone meal in it. It's got the green sand. It's got the rock phosphate. It's probably has manures. It's got just all kinds of good stuff. So if you really want to try to do it organically, this is a good way to do it, because it just combines everything, all this stuff together, and you don't have to wind up buying all these little odds and ends and then trying to make your own concoction up.
We use this year when we planted everything.
Yeah.
We changed a lot of the soil and we used it. And honest to God, our stuff is huge.
Yeah, you know, I've sold this stuff for years, and I use it in my mom's garden. I started using it about 3 or 4 years ago. And again, maybe it was a micronutrient that was deficient in her garden, but it seems almost magical. And I'm not sure everybody would have that success, but it wouldn't hurt to try it every once in a while. But these organics really do, you just use them once. You have to use them more heavily because they do work more slowly.
They're lighter too, aren't they?
Well, they could be different densities. I mean, but the thing is, you could use them, and then you maybe use them once every 2 months or so. So basically, you fertilize them when you first put your plants in, and then maybe one more time midsummer, and that's it. You don't have to worry about it too much. And there's very little probability of burning anything or hurting something or even over fertilizing, because they've become available so slowly.
Some of these are gorgeous.
Yeah, there's always been a real big interest in roses. Everybody, I think, that starts their garden would love to have a rose garden. It's been kind of tricky, though. Like you said, a lot of times people don't realize all the ins and outs of trying to grow roses. But over the last, I'd say, 10 or 12 years, a lot of new varieties have come out that are kind of designed to make it easier for people to grow roses. And there are different types of roses for the type of situation that you're looking for. There are all kind of roses depending upon your situation. Like you said before, there's climbing roses for fences, arbors, and trellises. And the most popular one that's always been popular is something called the hybrid tea rose. That's the one that most people are familiar with. They kind of grow kind of taller than they do wide, and they probably grow maybe 3 to 4 foot tall. And that was the most common ones. But since the last 15 or 20 years, they've really been promoting other types, such as floribunda roses, which they give you smaller flowers, but they give you a lot more flowers. A rose plant is only capable of producing maybe so many flowers, if you want to call it that way, pounds of flowers per plant. So you either wind up with fewer really large flowers or a lot of small flowers. And that's the growth habit of the kind that kind of get maybe, like you say, maybe 4 foot tall, maybe say 2 or 3 foot wide. That would be the floribundas and the hybrid teas. But in the last, say, 5 years, they've really been breeding varieties of roses known as shrub roses, ground cover roses, all different types of habits that are really more tuned to how people really garden in their landscape.
Right.
The bush roses or shrub roses are very, very disease resistant. They don't give you the same look as the hybrid tea rose, which are very formal looking flowers. It's more of kind of a natural look, but they do give you a lot of good roses. A lot of them have very good scents. But they're very disease resistant. You can plant them and grow them just like a shrub in your yard and really not worry about them too much, which is what most people are really looking for. They want something, they want to plant it, they want to enjoy it, but they really don't want the high maintenance that that's normally associated with roses going along with it. One of the biggest innovations in roses besides them building disease resistance, because not every single rose has disease resistance, has been in how we spray and how we take care of our roses. There's a new product out. It's only been out a few years, but from people using it, I know it's working very well. It's a product that it's a combination of an insecticide and a fertilizer, which has always been available, but it also has a fungicide mixed in with it, and you don't have to spray it. Most people... And
it keeps it from that powdery mildew that gets on the leaves. Our
problem, anybody that lives in New Jersey knows that once we get into end of June, early July, it gets extremely humid, and too much humidity is what causes a lot of the leaf spots on the roses. Something called black spot, which starts off as black spots, the leaves turn yellow, and the leaves fall off. Now, that could also happen from people watering. People improperly water their roses. They tend to...
and we'll get to that one.
Oh, okay.
In the next one.
But when you water them, you always want to water the soil for the best result. Always water the soil, never get the leaves wet. And if you do have a rose that is susceptible to diseases, if you use something like this is a systemic. Systemic means that when you introduce it to the plant, either by spraying it or drenching it on a plant, it actually goes right into the plant and it won't wash off. This stuff lasts for about 6 weeks. What you do is you mix it with water, a certain amount according to the directions. With about a quart of water, you actually drench the soil of all your roses, and it lasts for about 5 or 6 weeks. The fungicide gets taken up, the nutrients get taken up, and it actually controls insects too. So, and you don't have to spray. You can just mix it up and do it once every 5 or 6 weeks, and you pretty much have clear roses that without any disease problems that really bloom really well for you.
You know, I also used this on my phlox last year because that gets that.
Yeah, it's not only meant for roses, but anything mildew, a lot of the leaf problems that we get because of our high humidity and improper watering, this will help eliminate that.
Well, I hope your rose garden now grows bigger and better.
Because watering is the most important job. Anybody that's got a greenhouse, watering is the most important job. Water too much, the plant dies a slow, agonizing death. Water not enough, and it dies a very quick death.
Okay, so you want me to pick this one up?
Yeah, try picking that one up.
All right, okay. Okay.
Well, I see some stress on.
Yeah, a little stress.
On your face.
You know.
Okay.
No, that's always there, Mike.
And that one, probably almost one-handed.
Yeah, this is very light, and that, you know, I could have used a derrick to help.
Sounds like common sense that one is not watered and one isn't watered, but nowadays with the types of potting soils that we enjoy, years ago, again, going back to our grandparents and my dad, the potting soils that were available were these real heavy, dense, black potting soils. A lot of people that go back to what their grandparents and parents, they kind of equate those soils with being good, you know, dark and rich.
Rich, and that was the word.
And that's fine for your garden soil. That's fine in the lawn areas, but when you're talking about stuff in containers, it's something totally different. We look for lightweight soils that drain well, that provide a lot of oxygen for the plant roots, whereas people always associate plants giving off oxygen. The roots need oxygen in order to really function and do well. And the newer potting soils we have, the lightweight ones, really do supply a lot of oxygen so that the plants really grow well.
And which means, of course, that they need more water.
Well, yeah, and it's also fairly easy to figure out if they need water. The potting soils we use nowadays, there's a lot of peat moss in it, and peat moss is really cool stuff because it acts like a sponge. And it holds on to a lot of water, yet it holds on to a lot of oxygen. So that's why we like to use it in our potting soil mixes. The main advantage is when something does need water, it's very, very light because.
And that's the test.
That's a test. You could tell that this one needs water, and this one, you know, I can almost not even pick this one up. This one is fully saturated because the peat moss has absorbed enough water, and it's nice and full. Now, the only problem is you don't want to keep it full. If you keep it totally heavy every single day, there's not going to be enough oxygen even in the peat moss to really support the roots, and the plant is eventually going to die a very slow death because it does need oxygen. It gets the oxygen after you water this very thoroughly, as the soil dries out, the oxygen flows back into the soil so that the roots can function properly.
All right, so once you get it watered and you pick it up and it's heavy, then how many days or have to elapse, or how much time has to elapse before you water that again?
Okay, the way we do it is I tell everybody the same thing as we do when we're hiring somebody to work in our greenhouses. We always go by weight. If I'm thinking about watering a plant, say first thing in the morning, I'm going to work, and I have my hanging baskets out there on the deck, I'll try picking it up just like it might be hanging up. So what I'll try to do is I pick it up from the bottom. If it feels very, very heavy, I'm not going to water it. I'm going to let it go another day. If it feels like this one, if it feels noticeably lighter, then that means I want to water it. And when I do water it, some people think by watering, in fact,
I'm going to get at you.
I'm just going to go over the common thing. Some people, especially when we hire somebody, when they water, just kind of spritz it a little bit. And I'm done watering. Well, my plant's still fairly light. There's a very high water holding capacity in the soil. So what I'm really going to do is I'm going to keep watering it and watering it and watering it until it's starting to feel heavy. It's feeling heavier. But eventually what's going to happen is, and I'm just going to water, actually, you really can't overwater these when they do need water initially because, and I'm going to show you why. Most of our containers, any good plant container, will have a good drainage hole at the bottom. So it's designed so that the soil, when the soil gets saturated, all that extra water is going to run out this hole, which in a few minutes, you add a little more water to it without getting Dolly wet.
I grow.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take a little.
Once the soil cannot hold any more water, what's going to happen is, if I tilt it over a little bit, the excess water is going to drain out of this bottom hole. And when that happens, we're going to let that go until the next time it feels light.
What about a lawn? Now, I had read someplace that if you want to see if your lawn is watered thoroughly, you put a tuna fish can or something like that down, and when it's filled, your ground is watered.
Okay, well, the misconception with water, again, people have sprinkler systems and they water by hand. Most people have their sprinklers. I know when people come in with problems, they have sprinkler systems and they have them set for 15 or 20 minutes. That's not really enough to really wet the soil very deeply. The general rule of thumb is if you put an inch of water, which is about that much, on the surface of the soil over a long period of time, that's enough to wet the soil probably about maybe 6 or 8 inches. And that's what you really want, because you always want to water everything very thoroughly. You want it to dry out very, very slowly, which means for a lawn, maybe once every 4 or 5 days. Some lawns, if you have heavier soils, maybe once a week is fine. A lot different than how people set up their sprinkler systems to work every day or every other day. A lot of times they don't have problems, but a lot of times they're setting themselves up for disease problems on a lawn, and also a very, very shallow root system. What you said with the coffee can is a good way to test how much water you're putting out. You put a tuna fish can or a straight can on a lawn, turn either your oscillating sprinkler on or your regular lawn, your automatic sprinklers. See how long it takes to put 1 inch of water into that can. It might be an hour, it might be 2 hours. That's how long you want to water your lawn once every.
That's what you set your sprinklers.
That's what you set it for, because now you're watering the soil very deeply, and then you're not going to water again until the soil dries out, and then you're going to allow it to dry slowly, which puts oxygen back into the soil, which the roots need in order to really do well, so that your turf really does well.
Plus, it keeps it bug-free to an extent too when it's watered correctly.
Well, any grass that's growing very well, just like us, if we're healthy, we're more resistant to diseases, viruses, bacteria, things like that. If we get put under any stress, we're more likely to get something. And turf grass is no different. Too much heat, you let the grass dry out too much, that puts the grass under more stress. And the more stress it's under, it's more likely to pick up insect problems, especially something we see it a lot called chinch bugs. You'll usually find them starting in lawns in midsummer in our area, usually close to the sidewalks, close to the driveways, because that's what absorbs the heat and tends to dry the turf out in the summer. And so that area gets stressed out. The chinch bugs, for some reason, are more adaptable to getting started in that area, and they take off, and then you have insect problems in your lawn.
So let that be a lesson to you. Keep it well watered.
Container gardening is getting to be real big. In fact, we devote a lot of production in our greenhouses to doing stuff in containers, because most people don't have the time to plant stuff in their gardens or beds. But they do have the time to enjoy, and they're under decks and on their patio. So container gardening is very, very big. And even though we do grow a lot of stuff in containers, very easy to do your own. Some people are intimidated, especially if they haven't done it before. But I just want to just show you really how easy it is. As long as you use the right materials and do it the right way, it's very easy, and you're going to have very, very good success.
Okay, let's get started.
Well, the most important thing is, first of all, besides the plants, is the container. You can see this container. You can see myself through it. Has good drainage holes. A lot of people will pick out containers, solid containers, maybe if they got from somebody. You don't want that. If they are solid, you have to drill holes in the bottom. The fastest way to kill something is to plant something without any drainage holes. So we got one of those. The next most important thing is the soil. You don't want to use a real heavy, dense soil, especially you don't want to use topsoil out of your garden. You don't want to use bag topsoil. That stuff's too fine, and when you use it, it looks good when you first plant it, but over time it tends to get compressed. It gets very dense.
Yeah.
Very little
away from the edge.
And it stays too wet. Very little airspace. Not very good for the roots of the plant. So we like to use something called a soilless mix. A lot of people know there's trade names, Miracle Grow. There's Miracle Grow. There's all kinds of stuff. Basically, it's a mixture of peat moss. The white stuff in it is perlite. Sometimes it has vermiculite in it also. So that's basically the soil mix you want to do if you're going to use containers. And the way you start is basically, first of all, you pick out the plants that you're going to want to use, and you do that by how much light you have. You don't want to plant a geranium which likes a real lot of sunlight. If you have the real shady area of the yard, or if you have a deck with an overhang on it, it's just not going to thrive there. Other plants, like impatiens, if you have a shadier spot, well, then maybe that's what we would pick. But again, you want to pick the right plant for the right amount of sunlight.
I also love the impatiens because for me, and if you're not a lazy gardener, but if you have a lot of stuff planted, you don't have to dehead these.
Yeah, geranium. Yeah, usually the larger flower things as they bloom, it's a good idea to. What we do, I can show you that real quick. You snip as the flower matures and dies. You snip that off and let the rest die back, and that'll encourage more flowers in a lot. But like you said, impatiens. These are wax begonias. They produce so many flowers. You really don't have to deadhead them. They're almost foolproof.
Okay, let's go.
Well, it's really easy. You got your potting soil, you got your container, you got your plants. We're not going to do any kind of a fancy design or anything here, but all I'm going to do is, first thing I'm going to look at is, let's plant a geranium, I guess. I'll show up probably better. Is basically the depth of the plant. If I planted this thing without putting any soil on the bottom, it's going to be too deep for the plant. And when you look at a plant, I'm going to take it out of the pot right now. And notice how I take it out of the pot. What I do is there's a single stem on this thing. I'm just going to kind of work my fingers around the plant and kind of get my fingers on the soil so that when I tilt it over and kind of just flex the pot a little bit, it's going to come out. And if you have a good, well-grown plant, and I could tell this plant's well-grown, very nice white roots, that's because it's been grown in a really a good soil mix that has a lot of oxygen in it. The roots are nice and white. I can tell it's a good plant. Plus, the soil ball holds together fairly good. But you're going to want to make sure that the height of this plant, the soil right here, is going to be even with the amount of soil that you're going to put in this container. If you plant it too deep and the soil goes up over the plant could rot and die. If you plant it too shallow and it's sticking up, then these roots are going to dry out and the plant's going to suffer that way too. So what I'm going to do is just kind of guesstimating how much soil I'm going to use. And I'm going to throw some soil in the bottom of the pot and just kind of smushing around. And then I'm going to set the plant down and just kind of see where it sits. I want the soil level to be about a ½ inch below the surface, so when I water it, the soil doesn't come out. And that looks just about right. So that's about the right. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to fill in the rest with some more soil.
Okay, we're going to put this in?
We could put that in. In fact, if you want, that's the other big thing is combinations, and there's all different types of ways. Now, this is something called a spike. This is going to get big and tall, so by doing this is something you're going to want to display with a spike in the back and a geranium in the front. Okay. Now, this one, unfortunately, is a little shallower than this one, so we're going to put a little extra soil in the back here, and again, I'm going to set it in and press it down so that's at the right level. And these we're going to hold off until the end. Okay. But what we're going to just do now, I'm just going to fill the rest up with soil.
You're going to use a white or a pink?
What's that on the?
Oh, you're not.
We're not going to have enough room in this pot for that.
Oh, okay.
But all I'm doing is just adding a little. Make sure you do this someplace where you don't
You
mind
can be
getting a little
very
dirt
sloppy.
on it. Yeah, outside is a good place, or someplace you could sweep up. And all I'm doing is just filling in the little crevices that are left in here, just so it's level with the top of my plant. So there's the top of my plant, and Dolly's helping me out, and we got kind of everything in there. Now, when you go with, if you want to add some vines and things, it's always a good idea to use something with a small root ball, because for me to fit another plant like that in there, it's just not going to fit. So it's always good to buy small plants with small root balls. Then all you have to do is basically, maybe these would look good on the side. I'm just going to kind of punch a little hole in through here, because the soil is very easy to work with. It's nice and loose.
Well, they're pretty because what they do is they just hang over.
Yeah.
They grow and they...
Yep, and I'm going to press it in and just make sure it's slightly covered.
This is vinca, right?
That's vinca vine, we call it. It's nice. It trails, gets nice and full.
There you go.
Then the other thing we do right now, I'm just going to give it a good drink of water, and just like when we talked before, I'm always going to water it well so it's heavy, and I'm not going to water it again until I start to feel it a little bit light. That's just to give you the best root growth. And in about, I'd say, a month or so, this geranium is going to be nice and big and full. The vinca vine is going to be trailing, and the spikes are going to be real big. It's going to be a beautiful plant.
The thing is, though, don't be afraid to experiment with plants and vines and leaves. The coleus make beautiful planters mixed in with other things.
That's the fun of it too. It's not really expensive to try different little plants and see how the combinations work out. Some of our best combinations we've made just by trialing and
some of them have been like by leftovers.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff laying around, you shove it in, and it winds up being really good.
So you have to really think out of the box for this.
Yes.
Okay.
And be creative.
Well, I hope that gets you started. I'll see you all next week. In the meantime, happy gardening.